Hello again, friends. Are you ready to hear the rest of the tale? Then let us commence. We find our heroes after leaving their escape pod, and that whole mess about waking up in stasis tanks not knowing how they got there, behind, and trekking their way on foot out of the slags. Remember the slags? A district of Sigil decimated and twisted after a portal opened, spilling a good dose of the blood war into the streets several millennia ago. Even though the portal was eventually shut after about a week, legends say, the ward has never recovered. A nasty, burning, toxic sewer overrun by cannibals, hideous creatures, earthquakes, and worse, if you can believe it. Remind me to tell you about the Cadix sometime. So there they were, Varys, Drogon, Minko, and Regal. Remember them. Moving as steadily and speedily as they could through the aforementioned post-apocalyptic wasteland. Making matters more dire, night was approaching fast, and obviously, without making too fine a point, the Slags is not a place you want to visit at the highest of noon, so nighttime. Well, you get the terrifying picture, right? Doing their best to stay away from the various wandering and deadly creatures, as well as the random ooze portals or toxic clouds, the heroes plodded through the Slags, getting close to the outskirts in good time. It was probably only a matter of time, but they eventually ran into something, and that something was a pack of Vargwheels. Vargwheels resemble grotesquely deformed human-like heads, with leathery bat-like wings taking the place of ears. Lovely. Flailing tendrils crown and fringe their heads in place of hair, and an unnerving green glow can be seen in their eyes. They have jagged teeth inside their distended, shrieking maws. The best part about Vargwheels is they can curse you so that an abyssal spirit invades your body, causing a gruesome transformation. Over a period of hours, the victim's head takes on fiendish aspects, such as fangs, tentacles, and horns. At the same time, the person's ears grow larger, expanding into wing-like appendages. In the final moments, the victim's head tears away from the body in a fountain of blood, becoming another Vargwheel, which often then eagerly laps up the blood spilling from its former body. Once again, lovely. Thankfully, none of that happened to the heroes, and they, more or less, easily dispatched the foul creatures and soon made their way out of the Slags. Bordering the Slags is a slightly better but no less unsavory neighborhood named the Hive. I mean, who would choose to live on the edge of an abyssally tainted wasteland? No one, by choice of course, so the citizens of the Hive tended to be your downtrodden, your desperate and destitute, your sketchy, your shady and potentially murderous. The Lady of Pain's Caboose rarely, if ever, visit the Hive. As a result of their neglect, it has fallen to disrepair. Crumbling buildings and shanties are a common sight, and because of the lack of space, new structures are built on top of the old, looking as though they are on the verge of collapse. Brackish pools of nondescript water litter the forsaken streets, and an ever-present stench fills the air. Oh, and there are ooze portals here too. Life is hard in this ward and full of despair. The sheer poverty and hopelessness makes the people selfish, uncaring of others' well-being. Pickpockets, muggings, even murders are commonplace. Even the law and order fascists of the Harmonium have given up on the ward, rarely bothering to send in patrols, let alone set up a guard station. Exhausted and still reeling from the events and circumstances of the last 12 or so hours, our heroes shambled their way through the dirty streets of the Hive. Soon, they came upon a tavern lit with beguiling red lanterns named the Gentle Snare. Without much discussion needed on the subject, they approached looking for shelter and rest. They entered into a warm and inviting room, filled with enigmatic and instantly fascinating individuals, most of whom seemed to be made up of incredibly attractive women. It seems like our ill-starred heroes' luck was turning around, doesn't it? The Gentle Snare instantly painted them in a golden, glowy feeling, and they soon found themselves enjoying a lovely warm meal, a haunch of mutton and several hens served with cherries and Isgardian roses, I believe it was. And drink, a sumptuous Olympian vintage, to soothe the soul. The tavern's owner, a singularly beautiful and powerfully charismatic woman named Lilith, made them feel at home. She and the barkeep, a firebrand named Matzi, kept their glasses full and their spirits high. The city outside faded away along with all of their worldly troubles. None at the table could even recall the events of earlier in the day, and none wanted to. Why would they, with such welcoming and happy-making surroundings and food and drink of the highest quality at their fingertips? Easing nicely into the warm mood of the room, the heroes began to relax for the first time in Well, they honestly and truly couldn't remember the last time they felt this way. Soon, from a table nearby, they were asked to sit with a motley group of folks that they learned were members of something called the Bloodline, a vampire criminal syndicate who had a job for them. And by job, they meant jobs of the adventuring sort. It wasn't that strange for people like our heroes to be propositioned for these sorts of jobs given their obvious status as adventurer types. I mean, one of them is permanently haunting and walking around in a suit of war armor. Just a short note about vampires in Sigil. Thanks to the strange nature of the city, the Nightwalkers are able to come out in the day without any consequence, although many note that their appetite for blood is considerably reduced as well. Many, not all. The lead vampire, a dapper dandy of a bloodsucker named Titian Ventern, explained that the job was relatively straightforward. Find out what happened to a vampire named Unholy Reiner in a part of Sigil known as the Mnemosyne Quarter. Reiner had gone missing in the last few days, and his radio silence had the Bloodline concerned about his safety or worse. Titian also complained about the name Bloodline for Sigil's homegrown vampire crime syndicate. He felt it was too on the nose, and apparently there were a lot of members who agreed. He liked the Endless, but apparently there were issues with that one he wasn't legally able to talk about. Also at the table was a Tabaxi vampire, and Titian's lieutenant, named Mr. Tops, as well as members of a criminal network of lycanthropes known as the Family, who often worked in concert with the Bloodline, though the alliances could often prove rivalrous at best, or violent at worst. Such is the dance between vampire and lycan. Representing the family was Sir Anton, a werewolf and grown urchin from the streets of Waterdeep, a former hedge knight who made good, rough but now rich. Sir Anton is the alpha of his small pack of lycans that operate out of the Hive. Also repping the family there was Sweet Rose Abbott, a were-rat warlock from a wealthy family who ran away from it all after contracting lycanthropy. Marcus, the group's enforcer, a werebear who spends more time in ursine form than as a man, and, to wit, spent the whole time the heroes encountered him as a bear. A bear, just sitting there at the table in clothes, eating off of plates and drinking from glasses and everything. And finally, Jude, a nature cleric and worm. Jude ended up in Sigil when he accidentally opened a portal in a mystical glade on his homeworld of Telene. He now served as the group's healer and resident accountant. If you notice, lycans tend to be far more open about themselves than your average vampire. I mean, we know quite a bit about the members of the family here, but learned next to nothing about Mr. Tops, didn't we? And then you have Titian, who yes is demonstrative and talkative, but generally reveals nothing of himself while slowly lowering your defenses. Typical vampire narcissism. As the heroes said their goodbyes and that they would consider the Reiner job, Titian helped them by dropping a glamour that was running on them, revealing that most of the staff at the Gentle Snare, including Lilith, were actually succubi or incubi. The rest were demons or Yugoloths. Oh, okay, I see it now. Now the name of the place makes sense, doesn't it? They also met a flamboyant tiefling fixer named Figs, real name Figilalia Meriganth, who offered them a simple job: use a prepaid room at an inn to spy on a room in another inn across the street. Do it for a week and report if anything happens. Simple stuff, yeah? Afterward, the heroes got to act as such by thwarting a would-be assassination attempt on Lilith by a random shadow demon who showed up out of nowhere, telling her she can hide no longer before trying to escape. I'm sure that is something that will be important later, but for the moment it seemed well sorted by our heroes. Gaining much favour with Lilith and all at the Gentle Snare, the heroes left and hit the streets, looking to check into the room for some rest but also some work. Two birds with one stone and all that in it. It was soon clear, and odd, that the Harmonium seemed to be running some kind of crackdown in the Hive. As I've mentioned, a place the fascist police-like faction usually left to itself most of the time. Running straight into a heavily armed and angry concentration of the Hardheads, our heroes were definitely in a bit of a bind. One we'll have to save until next time, friends.